In today's tightly interconnected world, the idea that a regional conflict could remain local is becoming increasingly unrealistic. Modern military, economic, and political systems are so deeply linked that even a limited clash between two regional actors has the potential to trigger a global military chain reaction. What begins as a localized dispute can rapidly evolve into a crisis involving major powers, alliances, and global security structures. One of the main reasons for this vulnerability is the structure of modern alliances. Defense agreements, such as collective security pacts, are designed to deter aggression by promising mutual support. While these alliances promote stability in theory, they also create automatic escalation pathways. If one country is attacked, its allies may be legally or politically obligated to respond. This can instantly transform a regional conflict into a multinational military confrontation, even if the original issue was limited in scope. Geography also plays a critical role. Many of today's regional flashpoints are located in strategically vital areas, such as key shipping lanes, energy corridors, or border regions between rival power blocks. A conflict in such locations threatens not just the nations directly involved, but also global trade, energy supplies, and economic stability. When these interests are threatened, external powers feel compelled to intervene, either militarily or through coercive measures. Another major factor is military forward deployment. Global powers maintain military bases, troops, and assets far from their home territories. These forces exist to project power and reassure allies, but they also act as tripwires. If a regional conflict erupts near these deployments, even unintended incidents can pull major powers into direct confrontation. A single strike, misfire, or accidental encounter could rapidly escalate the situation beyond initial intentions. Modern warfare is no longer confined to land, sea, and air. Cyber and space domains have added entirely new layers of escalation. A regional conflict may involve cyber operations, targeting communications, infrastructure, or military command systems. These attacks rarely stay contained within national borders. Because networks are globally connected, cyber actions can affect allies, civilian populations, and international systems, forcing broader responses and increasing the risk of escalation. Information warfare further accelerates this process. In the age of instant communication, images, videos, and claims spread globally within minutes. Governments are pressured to respond quickly to public opinion shaped by incomplete or misleading information. A regional incident, framed as an act of aggression or humanitarian crisis, can generate international outrage and force leaders into decisions that escalate tensions before diplomacy has time to function. Economic interdependence makes containment even more difficult. Sanctions, blockades, or disruptions to trade routes are often used alongside military pressure. However, these actions impact global markets, supply chains, and energy prices. Countries not directly involved in the conflict may still suffer economic consequences, pushing them to take political or military action to protect their interests. This economic ripple effect expands the conflict's reach far beyond its origin. Another overlooked driver of escalation is deterrence psychology. Militaries rely on signaling strength to prevent adversaries from taking action, yet deterrence is based on perception, not intention. Defensive moves such as troop mobilizations or military exercises can be interpreted as preparations for attack. In a tense regional crisis, this misinterpretation can lead both sides to escalate preemptively, creating a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to stop. Historical precedent shows how easily this can happen. Past global conflicts often began with regional disputes that spiraled due to alliances, miscalculations, and rapid mobilization. While technology and diplomacy have evolved, human decision-making under pressure remains a constant risk factor. Leaders must make choices with limited information, under time constraints, and amid intense domestic and international pressure. Proxy warfare adds another layer of complexity. Major powers frequently support regional actors indirectly through training, intelligence, or weapons. This allows influence without direct involvement, but it also blurs responsibility. When proxy forces clash, their backers may feel compelled to escalate support, especially if credibility or influence is threatened. Over time, indirect involvement can turn into direct confrontation. Military modernization also contributes to instability. Advanced weapon systems reduce reaction times and increase destructive potential. Precision strikes, hypersonic weapons, and automated defense systems leave little room for error. In a regional conflict, these systems may be deployed rapidly, increasing the risk that a single incident triggers an uncontrollable chain reaction. Finally, diplomacy often struggles to keep pace with military escalation. Diplomatic processes are slow, deliberate, and dependent on trust. In contrast, military actions can occur in minutes or seconds. When communication channels are weak or broken, misunderstandings multiply. Without effective crisis management mechanisms, even small regional conflicts can spiral into global emergencies. This is why defense planners worldwide increasingly focus on escalation management rather than outright victory. Preventing a chain reaction is now as important as winning battles. Understanding how regional conflicts connect to global systems is essential for avoiding catastrophic outcomes. A single regional conflict does not need to be large or intentional to become global. It only needs to interact with alliances, economic systems, military deployments, and human decision-making under pressure. In this environment, containment is fragile, and escalation is always closer than it appears. While the idea of escalation often sounds abstract, the mechanics behind it are very real and actively shaping military planning today. Modern global militaries are not just preparing for isolated wars, they are preparing for scenarios where multiple regions ignite simultaneously, pulling different powers into overlapping conflicts. This reality makes any single regional conflict far more dangerous than it might appear on the surface. One key driver of this danger is strategic ambiguity. Major powers often avoid clearly defining red lines to maintain flexibility. However, ambiguity also increases the risk of miscalculation. In a regional conflict, one side may believe it can act without triggering a larger response, while the opposing side may interpret the same action as crossing an unspoken threshold. When nuclear-armed or alliance-backed states are involved, even small misjudgments carry enormous consequences. Military exercises play a dual role in this environment. They are designed to improve readiness and signal deterrence, but during a regional crisis, exercises can look indistinguishable from preparations for war. Troop movements, naval deployments, or air patrols meant as routine demonstrations can be misread as offensive intentions. In a tense situation, the margin between signaling strength and provoking escalation becomes dangerously thin. The speed of modern decision-making further intensifies the problem. Advanced surveillance, artificial intelligence, and real-time intelligence feeds give leaders unprecedented situational awareness. At the same time, they compress decision windows. Leaders may feel pressured to act immediately before an adversary gains an advantage. This use it or lose it mindset increases the likelihood of rapid escalation in the early stages of a regional conflict. Another critical factor is the blurring of civilian and military domains. Modern conflicts increasingly target infrastructure such as energy grids, communication networks, ports, and transportation hubs. Even limited attacks on these systems can disrupt daily life across borders. When civilians in multiple countries are affected, political pressure mounts for governments to respond, expanding the conflict's scope. Naval power dynamics are particularly sensitive in this regard. Many regional flashpoints are located near contested seas and choke points critical to global trade. A single naval incident involving warships or commercial vessels can disrupt shipping lanes, raise insurance costs, and force international intervention. Because global economies depend on maritime stability, naval clashes rarely remain local for long. Airspace control is another escalation pathway. In modern conflicts, air superiority is often pursued early. Close encounters between military aircraft from rival states carry high risks. History shows that near misses, interceptions, and accidental collisions can quickly escalate diplomatic crises. When multiple air forces operate in close proximity, a single incident can trigger retaliatory actions and alliance involvement. The role of non-state actors adds further instability. Armed groups, militias, and private military organizations often operate in regional conflicts with varying degrees of state backing. Their actions may not be fully controlled by sponsoring governments, yet those governments may still be held responsible. This creates plausible deniability on one side and suspicion on the other, fueling escalation through mistrust. Technology has also lowered the threshold for participation in conflict. Drones, long-range missiles, and cyber tools allow states to project power without deploying large forces. While this reduces immediate casualties, it increases the frequency of confrontations. Repeated low-level strikes can accumulate into a larger conflict as each side feels compelled to respond more forcefully over time. Media and narrative warfare amplify every step of this process. Governments frame actions defensively while portraying adversaries as aggressors. These narratives shape domestic and international opinion, limiting leaders' ability to de-escalate without appearing weak. Once public expectations harden, diplomatic compromise becomes politically costly, even if it would reduce the risk of global escalation. Global arms supply chains also contribute to chain reactions. When a regional conflict intensifies, arms shipments increase. This draws in supplier nations, who may provide intelligence, training, or logistical support alongside weapons. Over time, these indirect roles deepen involvement and raise the stakes for all parties. The economic consequences of regional conflicts can be just as destabilizing as military ones. Disruptions to energy supplies, rare earth materials, or key manufacturing hubs affect economies worldwide. Inflation, shortages, and market instability create domestic pressure on governments to act decisively. Economic self-interest then becomes another driver, pulling more actors into the conflict. Diplomatic institutions struggle in this environment. International organizations are often slow to respond and divided by competing interests. Veto powers, political alliances, and differing threat perceptions limit their effectiveness during fast-moving crises. As a result, military logic can dominate decision-making before diplomatic solutions are fully explored. Crucially, escalation does not require intent. No global power needs to desire a world-spanning conflict for one to emerge. Chain reactions are driven by fear, uncertainty, and the desire to avoid disadvantage. Each step may appear rational in isolation, yet collectively they create a path toward wider war. This is why military planners increasingly emphasize resilience and crisis communication. Hotlines, deconfliction mechanisms, and confidence-building measures exist precisely because leaders understand how fragile containment has become. However, these tools are only effective if used early and in good faith. A single regional conflict today acts like a stress test on the entire international system. It exposes weaknesses in communication, trust, and coordination. When those weaknesses align, escalation can spread faster than any one actor can control. Understanding these dynamics is essential because the greatest danger is not deliberate aggression, but unintended escalation driven by systems designed to react quickly in a world that moves faster than diplomacy. Another major reason global militaries are racing to prepare for multi-front conflict is the breakdown of predictable world order. For decades, power structures were relatively stable, alliances were clear, and escalation pathways were understood. Today, that predictability is fading. Multiple power centers now operate simultaneously, each with its own security priorities, threat perceptions, and red lines. This fragmentation increases the risk that regional crises overlap and reinforce each other. One important shift is the return of great power competition. Major military powers are no longer focused on a single dominant rival. Instead, they are preparing for scenarios where they may face pressure in more than one region at the same time. This forces militaries to stretch resources, plan for divided attention, and accept higher levels of risk. Preparation for a multi-front war is not about expecting one massive conflict, but about surviving sustained pressure from several directions. Logistics has become a central concern. Modern warfare consumes enormous amounts of fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and data. In a multi-front scenario, supply chains become vulnerable targets. Militaries are investing heavily in redundancy, stockpiling, and rapid resupply capabilities because they assume adversaries will try to disrupt logistics early. A regional conflict that targets ports, rail networks, or air bases can quickly impact operations thousands of kilometers away. Space has also emerged as a critical domain. Satellites support navigation, communication, intelligence, and missile warning systems. Any regional conflict involving advanced militaries now includes space-related considerations. The disruption or loss of space assets would affect not just one battlefield, but all military operations globally. This interconnectedness means escalation in one region could degrade capabilities elsewhere, forcing broader responses. Cyber warfare adds another layer of complexity. Cyber operations rarely stay contained within borders. Attacks on financial systems, government networks, or critical infrastructure can spill over into allied or neutral countries. Attribution is often unclear, creating confusion and suspicion. In a crisis, cyber incidents can trigger defensive measures that escalate tensions, even if no physical attack was intended. Alliance dynamics play a decisive role in escalation pathways. Defense treaties are designed to deter aggression, but they also mean that a conflict involving one member risks drawing in many others. Once an alliance commits forces or resources, disengagement becomes politically and strategically difficult. This is why militaries plan not just for national defense, but for coalition warfare across multiple theaters. Regional conflicts are also increasingly influenced by domestic politics. Leaders operate under public scrutiny amplified by social media and 24-hour news cycles. Images, claims, and narratives spread instantly, often without verification. Public outrage or fear can limit leaders' options, pushing them toward stronger military responses even when restraint might reduce escalation risks. Technological parity between rivals further complicates deterrence. In the past, overwhelming superiority allowed some powers to control escalation. Today, near-peer competitors possess advanced missiles, air defenses, electronic warfare systems, and precision strike capabilities. This balance makes quick, decisive victories unlikely. Instead, conflicts risk becoming prolonged, increasing opportunities for spillover into other regions. The role of emerging technologies cannot be ignored. Artificial intelligence is being integrated into command systems, targeting processes, and decision support tools. While AI can improve efficiency, it also raises concerns about speed and control. Automated or semi-automated responses could reduce human judgment at critical moments, increasing the chance of unintended escalation during fast-moving crises. Economic interdependence, once seen as a stabilizing force, now has mixed effects. On one hand, global trade creates incentives to avoid conflict. On the other, economic leverage is increasingly used as a weapon. Sanctions, trade restrictions, and financial pressure can escalate alongside military actions. When economic warfare spreads across regions, it reinforces the perception of a broader confrontation. Energy security remains a powerful trigger. Many regional flashpoints are located near major energy producers or transit routes. Disruptions can cause global price spikes and supply shortages, affecting countries far from the conflict zone. Governments facing domestic economic stress may respond with stronger foreign policy actions, further widening the crisis. Military doctrine itself has evolved to reflect these realities. Concepts such as integrated deterrence, multi-domain operations, and distributed lethality all assume conflict will be complex, interconnected, and spread across multiple regions and domains. Preparation for such scenarios is now embedded in training, procurement, and strategic planning. Importantly, preparation does not equal desire for war. Militaries prepare because uncertainty is high and reaction time is short. The cost of being unprepared in a multi-front scenario is seen as unacceptable. However, widespread preparation can also create a security dilemma where defensive measures are perceived as offensive threats by others. Diplomacy struggles to keep pace with this environment. Crisis management requires trust, communication, and time, resources that are often scarce during fast-moving regional conflicts. When multiple crises occur simultaneously, diplomatic bandwidth is stretched thin, increasing reliance on military tools to manage risks. What makes the current moment particularly dangerous is the accumulation of unresolved tensions. Each regional conflict adds strain to the international system. Over time, these stresses interact, making chain reactions more likely. A crisis that might have been contained in the past now occurs in an environment already primed for escalation. Ultimately, global militaries are racing to prepare because they see a world where containment is harder, reaction time is shorter, and mistakes are more costly. The danger lies not in one decision, but in a sequence of rational responses that collectively push the world closer to a multi-front confrontation. As global militaries prepare for the possibility of cascading conflicts, one of the most concerning factors is how quickly regional crises can outpace decision-making. Modern warfare moves faster than diplomacy. Missiles travel in minutes, cyber attacks unfold in seconds, and information, accurate or false, spreads instantly. In this environment, leaders may be forced to act before fully understanding the consequences, increasing the risk that a localized conflict spirals into a global chain reaction. Military exercises today reveal this anxiety. Large-scale drills increasingly simulate simultaneous crises in different regions. Forces train to defend allies while protecting their own territories, secure sea lanes while maintaining air superiority, and respond to cyber disruptions while managing kinetic operations. These exercises are not hypothetical fantasies. They are based on assessments that future conflicts will be overlapping rather than sequential. One major concern is escalation control. Once a regional conflict begins, each side attempts to signal strength without crossing red lines. However, red lines are often ambiguous and interpreted differently by each actor. Actions intended as deterrents, such as troop deployments, missile tests, or naval patrols, can be seen as preparation for attack. This misinterpretation fuels reactive decisions that widen the conflict. Nuclear deterrence still plays a central role, but its stabilizing effect is more fragile than in the past. While nuclear weapons discourage total war, they do not prevent conventional conflicts, proxy wars, or hybrid warfare. In fact, nuclear-armed states may feel emboldened to act aggressively at lower levels, believing escalation will be capped. This paradox increases the frequency of regional confrontations that could escalate unintentionally. Proxy dynamics further complicate matters. Many regional conflicts involve indirect participation by major powers through arms supplies, intelligence sharing, and training. These indirect roles can quickly deepen if one side gains the upper hand or if proxies suffer heavy losses. What begins as support can evolve into direct involvement, especially when credibility and alliance commitments are at stake. Maritime choke points represent another vulnerability. Strategic waterways are critical to global trade and military mobility. A regional conflict near one of these choke points can disrupt global supply chains and draw in external powers seeking to protect their interests. Naval incidents are particularly dangerous because encounters at sea often allow little room for error or de-escalation. Airspace management is equally risky. Increased military aviation activity during crises raises the likelihood of accidents or confrontations. An intercepted aircraft, a misidentified radar signal, or an accidental incursion can rapidly escalate tensions. In a charged environment, even minor incidents can trigger broader military responses. Domestic stability also influences escalation pathways. Governments facing internal pressure may use external threats to rally public support or distract from domestic challenges. This dynamic can harden positions and reduce willingness to compromise. When multiple governments face similar pressures simultaneously, regional crises can reinforce one another. Another accelerating factor is arms proliferation. Advanced weapon systems are more widely available than ever. Precision-guided munitions, drones, and electronic warfare tools are no longer limited to major powers. Their use in regional conflicts increases destruction and unpredictability, raising the stakes for external actors monitoring the situation. Information warfare intensifies every stage of escalation. Narratives are crafted to justify actions, blame opponents, and shape international opinion. Disinformation can inflame public sentiment and pressure leaders to respond forcefully. Once narratives take hold, backing down becomes politically costly, even if military escalation is strategically unwise. Despite these risks, there are still mechanisms that can slow escalation. Military-to-military communication channels, crisis hotlines, and confidence-building measures remain critical. When they function properly, they help clarify intentions and reduce miscalculation. However, trust in these mechanisms has eroded in recent years, weakening their effectiveness. The international system is now operating under sustained stress rather than isolated shocks. Each new crisis adds to an existing burden of tensions, rivalries, and unresolved disputes. This accumulation effect makes chain reactions more likely because there is less margin for error. Global militaries understand this reality. Their preparations reflect not just fear of a single catastrophic war, but concern about continuous instability. The goal is resilience, being able to operate under pressure, adapt quickly, and manage escalation across multiple fronts without collapse. Yet preparation itself carries risks. When every major power prepares for worst-case scenarios, suspicion grows. Defensive measures appear offensive, and arms races intensify. This creates a feedback loop where preparation drives insecurity, which in turn drives more preparation. Military readiness must be balanced with diplomacy, communication, and restraint. Otherwise, the very systems designed to prevent disaster may accelerate it. What makes it dangerous today is the interconnected nature of power, technology, alliances, and perception. Escalation is no longer linear. It is networked. Decisions in one region ripple outward, shaping responses elsewhere in real time. This is why global militaries are racing to prepare. In a world of overlapping crises, the difference between containment and catastrophe may depend on preparation, judgment, and the ability to pause before reacting. The future will be defined not by who has the most weapons, but by who can manage complexity without losing control. Whether the world avoids a global military chain reaction will depend on choices made in moments of pressure, moments that are becoming more frequent, more compressed, and more consequential.